My name is Bianca Overton. At 32 years old, I got married in a drafty courthouse, wearing an $89 dress I bought online. No flowers, no music, and absolutely no family. It was not because we were broke. My husband's tech startup was about to be worth $50 million. I stood there alone because on that exact Saturday, all 40 of my relatives chose to attend my sister Megan's 30th birthday party. Every aunt, cousin, and even my grandmother chose her over me. But 3 weeks later, the world changed. And 6 weeks after that, my mother called with the words that proved what I already knew. We need to talk about the family. You and I know exactly what she wanted. But here is a secret none of them knew. I had been preparing for that exact phone call since the morning after my wedding. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the place where real family drama meets real, unvarnished consequences. There are no fairy tale endings here, just the cold, hard truth. If this hits close to home, tell me your story in the comments and subscribe. In my family, the hierarchy was never subtle. My mother, Diane, ran our lives like a stage production. She was the director, and my sister, Megan, was always cast as the shining star. My younger brother, Tyler, got the charming supporting role. And me? I was just the stage crew. I was the one who showed up, did the heavy lifting, and never expected any applause. My parents divorced when I was 11 years old, and my father packed up and moved to Oregon with a woman named Pam. He sent birthday cards for the first 2 years, and then the mail simply stopped. My mother quietly blamed me for his absence. She never said it outright, but the poison was always there in her voice. "You look just like your father," she would snap whenever I annoyed her, noting my eyes and stubborn mouth. Megan was 3 years older than me and had inherited everything our mother valued: confidence, volume, and an undeniable presence. She was the kind of person who effortlessly filled a room, while I just happened to exist in it. Tyler was 4 years younger, the golden accident. To our mother, Tyler could do absolutely no wrong. He just needed a little more time, a little more patience, and always a little more of her money. I quickly learned where I stood when she completely forgot my 16th birthday, only remembering 3 days later. I remember sitting in my room, listening to her half-hearted apology over the phone, while Megan's loud voice echoed in the background, planning a massive shopping trip. Mom claimed she was busy, though she never said with what. She never forgot Megan's birthday, not once. In our house, being competent was the fastest way to become completely invisible. Since I stopped asking for help at 13, I was forgotten. I finally left at 18 with a scholarship and 2 suitcases. I went to a state university to major in computer science. Nobody drove me to campus, and nobody helped me carry my 2 bags up to my dorm. To survive, I worked 2 jobs throughout college, tutoring math on weekday evenings and stocking grocery shelves on the weekends. My mother called exactly once during that first semester, only to ask if I would come home for Megan's engagement party to Kevin. When I told her I had final exams, her voice went cold as she said Megan would be disappointed. I did not bother pointing out that Megan had not bothered to call me herself. I eventually graduated with a 3.9 GPA and 0 debt, moving into a small city apartment and landing a software job within 2 months. I spent the next 4 years working my way up from a junior developer to a senior engineer. I was good at building things quietly, behind the scenes. It was, after all, the only real skill my family had ever taught me. Then, at a tech conference in 2019, I met Ethan. He was on stage presenting a product demo, while I was sitting in the back row, furiously debugging a client issue on my laptop. Afterward, he walked up and asked if his presentation had been that boring. I looked him in the eye and told him his database architecture needed serious work. He laughed, we grabbed coffee, and I realized he was just like me. Quiet, incredibly focused, and completely allergic to family drama. When I finally gathered the courage to describe my family, Ethan just listened without trying to fix the unfixable. That was so rare. On our 5th date, after I laid out the full extent of the Overton dysfunction, he looked at me and said 4 words that no one in my life had ever uttered. They do not deserve you. He was not trying to be dramatic or overly romantic. He just stated it like a simple physical fact. I believed him because he had absolutely no reason to lie to me. When he proposed in October, it was beautifully simple. A quiet walk along the river, a custom ring, and a question I accepted immediately. We set our date for March 15th. I called my mother, and she answered on the 4th ring. I told her, "Mom, Ethan and I are getting married on March 15th. There was a heavy, empty pause on the line. Then she muttered, "That is nice, honey," before immediately pivoting. "Listen, Megan just booked the Monarch downtown for her 30th birthday. Can you believe it? 300 guests!" I forced out a congratulations and asked if she had actually heard what I said about my wedding. She claimed she did and said she was happy, but her mind was already gone. I didn't let it ruin my hope. I sat down and handcrafted 42 cream-colored save-the-date cards, writing each address with my own hands. I sent them to every aunt, uncle, cousin, and grandparent, mailing them on a Tuesday. 2 weeks later, Megan made a massive post on Instagram. Her 30th birthday party was scheduled for March 15th, complete with a professional DJ, high-end catering, and the theme, Megan's Golden Era. I immediately called our mother, pointing out that Megan knew that was my wedding day. "Honey, Megan has been planning this for months," she sighed. "You are flexible, Bianca. You always have been." I had heard variations of that sentence my entire life. "You understand, Bianca. You are the strong one." What they really meant was, "You are the one we never have to consider." Within a single week, the RSVPs came back. 42 cream-colored envelopes sent out, and 42 rejections returned. Not a single yes. I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of 42 rejected invitations. I opened them one by one. Aunt Linda wrote, "So sorry, sweetheart, but Megan's party has been on our calendars forever. You can always get married another day, right?" Uncle Frank promised they would try to make it up to us, with 0 explanation. But it was Cousin Harper's card that made my blood run cold. She wrote, "Mom said your wedding was postponed. Are you doing it next month instead?" Postponed? If you have ever been gaslit by your own family, you know the exact sinking feeling I felt. I checked 3 more cards, and they all said my wedding was called off. I immediately dialed Aunt Linda. "Linda, who told you my wedding was postponed?" I asked, keeping my voice level. There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end. "Well, your mother called us last week," she admitted. "She said you were pushing the date back because of some scheduling conflict." My own mother had systematically called every single one of our relatives to tell them my wedding was not happening on March 15th. I did not scream. I did not shed a single tear. I slowly set my phone down on the table and looked at the pile. 42 cards. 0 family. The only yes was from Kim, my best friend from college, and Rachel didn't even wait for a card. She called immediately and said, "I will be there. What should I wear? I completely stopped checking the mail after the 28th RSVP came back. Out of 42 sent cards, I did not need to see the remaining 14 to understand what had happened. My mother had not just chosen Megan's party over mine. She had actively erased my wedding from existence. There is a massive, painful difference between being treated as second best and being completely deleted. When Ethan came home at 9 o'clock that night, he found me sitting quietly on the couch, staring at the pile of envelopes. The living room smelled of cold, untouched tea I had brewed 3 hours prior. He sat beside me, read one card, set it down, and simply asked, "What do you want to do?" It was the only question that mattered. "I want to marry you on March 15th, I told him, looking into his eyes. "I do not care where we do it." He didn't hesitate. "Then we marry on March 15th, he said. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me tight against his shoulder, and we sat in silence while the pile of rejected envelopes rested on the coffee table like a final verdict. Around 10 o'clock, Ethan's phone began to buzz. It was his co-founder, Marcus. I could hear Marcus's excited voice leaking through the speaker, talking fast about legal paperwork, state filings, and tight timelines. Ethan stepped quietly into the bedroom and shut the door. When he emerged minutes later, his face was equal parts exhausted and completely electric. "Yeah," Ethan said, breathing out a sigh. "Marcus says the official paperwork is finally filed. 6 weeks, maybe 7. I looked at him, confused. 6 weeks until what? He just smiled at me, the quiet, gentle kind of smile that holds a massive secret. "I will tell you when it is officially real," he promised. "Right now, let us just focus on March 15th. I did not press him for more details. Ethan was a man who never made promises he could not keep, and he never shared big news until it was completely set in stone. In a family where words meant absolutely nothing, I had found a partner whose words meant everything. I packed up the 42 envelopes, hid them in a shoebox, and went to sleep. On March 15th, at 7:45 in the morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I was wearing the simple, knee-length $89 white dress I had ordered online 3 weeks ago. It fit well enough. Ethan looked handsome and beautifully nervous in his navy suit, the one he normally saved for high-stakes investor meetings. Rachel burst through our door at 7:30, clutching a bodega bouquet of daisies and baby's breath. She was already crying in her blue dress before we even left the apartment. "Stop," I laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I cannot help it," she whispered. "You look so beautiful." Let us pause here, because this quiet morning was where my real life finally began. "It is just a courthouse, Rachel," I muttered, staring at the drab walls. "But it is your wedding," she shot back, her voice thick with emotion. And she was right. It was. The judge's chambers smelled like stale coffee and cheap printer ink. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and a row of plastic chairs lined up against the wall. The entire ceremony took exactly 8 minutes. The judge read the vows, we repeated them, and at 8:03 in the morning, I legally became Bianca Overton. Rachel sobbed through every single second. I did not shed a tear. Afterward, we took photos on the steps outside. Rachel held my cheap bodega bouquet and snapped photos on her phone. A kind stranger offered to take a picture of all 3 of us, and I still keep that photo framed in my bedroom. 3 people standing on the steps, and one of them was crying her eyes out. By 8:15, the 3 of us were perched on the hood of Ethan's car, eating cheap breakfast tacos in the parking lot. It was the absolute best morning of my life. But that evening, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. My sister Megan's birthday party was in full swing. Giant balloons, a 3-tier cake, a disc jockey, and over 40 guests in cocktail dresses. Mom had given a toast. I watched the video clip. "To my beautiful firstborn," she said, "the light of our family." I closed the app. I did not post a single thing about my wedding. There was simply nobody left to tell. The next morning, I woke up at 6:12. Ethan was already gone when I opened my eyes. He had an early meeting at the office, something about a pre-filing review. I checked my phone, hoping for something, but there were no messages from my family. 0. Not a text, not a voicemail, not even a missed call. The family group chat had only one new message from the night before. It was a photo of Megan's birthday cake posted by my mother. Her caption read, "What a night." I stared at that glowing screen for a long time. 40 people had gathered to celebrate my sister's 30th birthday. 0 people from my family had acknowledged that I had just gotten married. The group chat was the ultimate proof, not just of what they had done, but of what I had never been to them. I got out of bed, made coffee, and sat at my laptop. I opened a blank document and typed the title, Declaration of Financial Independence. I did not know the exact legal wording yet, but I knew I needed it to exist. I wanted something formal, something with weight that finally said in writing what I had been too afraid to say out loud for 32 years. I am not your emergency fund, your backup plan, or your flexible option. At 9, I called Rachel. "I need a lawyer's name," I said. "Someone who handles family civil matters, not divorce, more like formal boundary documentation." She promised to text me someone by noon. That night, at 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Tyler. "Hey sis, congrats or whatever. Hey, you are still at Chase Bank, right? Can you check something for me? It is not a big deal, just a balance thing." I read the text twice, my hands shaking slightly. My own brother, who had not bothered to attend my wedding, who could not even bring himself to say the word married, was texting me in the dead of night about bank accounts. I did not reply. 42 save-the-date cards had been sent out. 0 family members showed up to watch me get married. And now, my brother was hitting me up at 2 in the morning for a banking favor. Right then, I knew I had 2 choices. I could keep hoping they would magically change, or I could start building a life that they would never be allowed to touch. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments down below. 3 long weeks slowly passed by. The silence from my family was absolutely deafening. No congratulations card, no phone call, not even a simple, half-hearted text saying they were sorry they missed it. In the Overton household, silence had always been the ultimate punishment. Except this time, I realized the silence was not a punishment at all. It was just pure, cold indifference. They had not even bothered to be angry with me. They had simply not noticed my absence. But I used those 3 weeks to my advantage. While Ethan worked 14-hour days at the office preparing for something major he still would not name, I built my exit. The lawyer Rachel recommended was named David Flores. David was quiet, precise, and completely no-nonsense. He listened to my situation for 45 minutes and then said, "You do not need a restraining order. You need a declaration." We drafted it together. The Declaration of Financial Independence. 1 page, notarized, and crystal clear. It stated that I would not co-sign any loan for any member of my immediate or extended family. I would not provide monetary gifts exceeding $100. I would not bail out any debt, whether consumer, gambling, or otherwise. I would not serve as a financial guarantor or lend money against future assets. David asked if I was sure. I told him I had been sure ever since that 28th blank RSVP came back in the mail. He notarized the document on a Wednesday. I signed my name in black ink and watched David press his metal seal into the paper. It felt like the first official document of my real life. I placed the letter in my desk drawer along with 4 copies, one for each member of my family. I did not know when I would need them, but I knew I would. 3 weeks of total silence. 3 weeks of building my walls. And somewhere in downtown Manhattan, a clock was ticking towards something none of us could have predicted. Tuesday, April 5th, the day everything shifted. Ethan's company, the startup he co-founded 3 years earlier with Marcus, which had burned through 2 massive rounds of funding and 3 office spaces, was finally going public. The stock opened at $14 per share and closed at $19. The total company valuation hit $50 million. As the co-founder and chief technology officer, Ethan held roughly 8% of the company. On paper, by the time the markets closed that Tuesday, his stake was worth just over $4 million. I watched it all unfold from my desk on the engineering floor. I had been employee number 7, hired 18 months before the launch. I had my own small equity stake. It was not millions, but it was enough to change our lives. The office erupted. People cheered, hugged, and took selfies with the stock ticker on the break room television while Marcus popped champagne. Ethan found me at my desk, looking completely dazed. "It is real," he said. "It is actually real. What do you want to do tonight?" I thought about it. Thai food. Our apartment. Just us. He grinned. Done. That night, we sat on our second-hand couch, eating pad thai straight from the cardboard containers while watching the financial news coverage on mute. $4 million in equity, a $50 million company, and we were eating a $12 takeout meal in our tiny one-bedroom apartment. "We should probably look at buying a house," Ethan suggested. "I already have a list of properties," I replied. He laughed, and honestly, he should not have been surprised by my preparation. I had been researching neighborhoods ever since Marcus first mentioned the IPO timeline. That was just who I was. Competent, prepared, always ready. Nobody in my family had any idea what had just happened, and I had no plans to tell them. But the secret did not stay quiet. An article came out 4 days after the launch on a local tech blog. It was titled, "Meet the team behind the $50 million startup that just went public." Ethan's photo was right there, along with his full name, title, and history. A former classmate shared it on LinkedIn, a colleague reposted it, and someone tagged him on Facebook. The chain reaction took less than 48 hours, and my sister Megan saw it first. I knew she saw it because she screenshotted the article and posted it directly into the family group chat. Yes, the exact same group chat where not a single soul had mentioned my wedding. The same chat where my mother had happily shared a photo of Megan's birthday cake with the caption, "What a night." Megan's message read, "Did you guys know about this? Bianca's husband?" Aunt Linda was the first to reply with, "Wait, what?" Then Uncle Frank chimed in, "That Ethan? The quiet one?" Tyler sent 3 laughing emojis followed by a money bag. Finally, Mom messaged, "What? Let me call her." I sat there and watched the messages scroll by on my screen in real time, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. The family group chat that I muted the morning after my wedding was suddenly the most active it had been in months. 27 messages in 90 minutes, and every single one was about money. Not one started with congratulations on the IPO. Not one person asked, How are you? They went from zero awareness to full financial interest in the time it took to read a blog post. Then my phone lit up. Mom calling. Then again. A third time. A fourth. I let it ring, sitting in our apartment, watching the screen pulse with her name. Diane Overton. Diane Overton. On the fifth call, I finally picked up. Bianca, honey, she said. I immediately recoiled at that word. Honey. She had not called me honey since I was 12. Hi, Mom, I said. How are you, sweetheart? How is married life? She asked, dripping with sudden affection. I have been meaning to call you, but things have just been so crazy with Tyler in the house and everything. She did not mention the wedding she missed. She did not apologize for the birthday party, nor did she acknowledge the 42 empty RSVPs. She skipped straight past all of it like traffic she could just merge around. Fine, Mom, I said. Good, good. So, I saw something online about Ethan's company. That is wonderful. Your father's side of the family always had that strong business sense. I always knew you would do well, she said. You and I both know she was lying. In 32 years, my mother had never credited me with any potential. Now she was rewriting history in real time, trying to attach herself to a success she had no part in. Mom, why are you calling? I asked. A pause followed, the rehearsed kind. Actually, honey, I need to talk to you about something. Tyler has been having some financial issues. It is nothing major, but it has been weighing on us. Can we meet as a family? Somewhere we can sit down and talk like adults? I let the silence hold for 3 seconds. When? This weekend? At your place? We are moving soon. I will send you the new address. Moving? Where? She stammered. You will see when you get there. I hung up. She had used that sweet honey tone 4 times. The last time she spoke to me like that, I was in middle school, and she needed a free babysitter. Nothing had changed. We closed on the house 11 days after the IPO. $3.8 million. A modern farmhouse on 2 acres, 20 minutes outside the city. It had 5 bedrooms, gorgeous floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, and an open kitchen that could easily seat 12 people. We paid for it using our savings and the proceeds from a pre-initial public offering secondary share sale that Ethan had quietly arranged 6 months earlier. It was not reckless. It was meticulously planned. The numbers worked because we spent 3 long years in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment, saving 60% of our combined income. On the first day, I walked through the empty rooms, listening to my footsteps echo. Sunlight stretched in long rectangles across the pristine hardwood floors. 5 bedrooms for 2 people who had spent their entire relationship in 900 square feet. Before any furniture arrived, I placed just one item in the house: our marriage certificate. Framed in a simple gold frame, with the courthouse seal still clearly visible in the lower corner, I hung that certificate on the wall, right inside the front entryway, perfectly at eye level. Anyone walking through the door would see it before they saw anything else. It was $27 for the paper and $12 for the frame, making it the most expensive document in a $3.8 million house. Not because of what we paid, but because of what it represented. I texted my mother the new address, and she replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji and a brief message saying, "See you Saturday." A $3.8 million home, and the very first thing on the wall was a cheap courthouse document. I stood in the empty entryway and just stared at it. My name, Ethan's name, and that unforgettable date, March 15th. That was the day 40 of my own family members chose a birthday party over my wedding. 2 days before our scheduled family meeting, My friend Rachel sent me a link. "You need to see this," her text read. There was no context, just a raw link. It led me straight to an online gambling forum. It was filled with anonymous posts and weird user handles, but Rachel is a brilliant data analyst. She had managed to trace Tyler's profile through a digital trail of breadcrumbs I never would have thought to follow. His username was just a slight variation of his old Xbox gamer tag, and his entire posting history read like a terrifying spreadsheet of crushing debt. I sat there in the silence, reading through his desperate posts for an entire hour. My brother owed money to 3 separate sources: online poker platforms, a sports betting app, and a loan from someone he only referred to as D. He had borrowed $45,000 from our mother's retirement account, $20,000 from Megan, $15,000 from our grandmother, and smaller amounts from college friends who no longer took his calls. The grand total was $180,000. But one specific post stopped me cold. It was written the week of my wedding, and it said, "My sister just married some tech guy. Once the money hits, I am golden." I read those words over and over. Once the money hits, I am golden. He had posted that online while I was signing my marriage certificate at the courthouse. He wrote it while I was eating breakfast tacos in a parking lot with my husband and the one friend who showed up, and while Mom was giving her speech at Megan's party. Tyler was typing to strangers, calculating what my marriage was worth to him. I screenshotted everything and saved it to a folder labeled Family Meeting. I printed his post and slid it into the envelope next to my Declaration of Financial Independence. Evidence and boundaries, side by side. By Thursday evening, 2 days out, I sat at the kitchen island with the final draft. My lawyer, David Flores, had reviewed my declaration one last time. No changes were needed. The language was clear, the scope was airtight, and the notary seal was fully valid in our state. It was not a legal injunction or a restraining order. It was a written boundary, a formal statement that I would never be anyone's financial safety net. I printed 4 copies, one for Mom, one for Tyler, one for Megan, and one for Dad, who had suddenly called Mom to say he was coming too. I had not seen my father in 4 years. He had remarried, moved to a new state, and checked out of parenting around the same time I stopped expecting him to care. Each copy went into a plain white envelope. I wrote each of their names on the front in thick black ink. Ethan walked into the kitchen and looked at the 4 envelopes lined up on the granite countertop. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. I told him I had been sure ever since the 28th RSVP came back empty. He just nodded. He did not try to talk me out of it or question my methods. He did what a good partner does: asked, accepted, and stood by me. Rachel texted, offering to come on Saturday as backup. "No," I replied. "This is mine to do. Last time I sent 42 envelopes and got nothing back. This time, I am giving them 4 envelopes and I expect nothing back. Different math, same family." I placed the folder of Tyler's forum screenshots right next to the envelopes. Then, I went into the empty living room and sat on the floor, staring out the window at the dark yard. The new furniture was not arriving until Saturday morning. By Friday night, the house was completely empty, except for a mattress on our bedroom floor and the marriage certificate hanging in the entryway. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood, my phone screen casting a blue glow over the room. I was scrolling through old photos, not on purpose. I had been searching for an old digital receipt and somehow drifted all the way back into my camera roll from 2005. There I was, 11 years old, holding a science fair certificate for 2nd place in a regional competition. I was smiling so hard my eyes were squeezed shut. Behind me, There was nothing. No parents, no siblings, just a blank gymnasium wall and a table of juice boxes. That was the week my father left. My mother was busy dealing with divorce lawyers, Megan was at a sleepover, and Tyler was 5 and staying with a neighbor. Nobody showed up for me. I won second place and walked home completely alone. I kept scrolling through my phone. Every single milestone photo from my teenage years was exactly the same. Just me, standing alone, holding up something I had worked hard to earn. While dance recital programs for Megan filled our old family photo albums, my milestone pictures only existed on my phone. I opened our family group chat and found 112 unread messages since that article about our initial public offering had dropped. I read the last 50. It was Megan organizing the logistics for Saturday, asking about driving times and directions. Tyler was asking if my new house had a pool. Mom shared an online article about how to talk to family about money without making things awkward. Not a single text mentioned my wedding. No apologies, and no mention of the 42 skipped invitations. I almost called my mother. My thumb hovered over her name. Almost. But I shut the phone. I went to sleep on that mattress on the floor of my $3.8 million house. I was not even angry anymore, and that was the scariest part. I was just done. On Saturday morning, the delivery truck arrived at 8:15. I had planned the timing deliberately so everything would be fully set up by 11, before our family meeting at 1. I wanted them to walk into a fully furnished, lived-in home. Not to impress them, but because this was my life now, and I was not going to apologize for it. The movers worked incredibly fast, arranging a designer sectional in the living room, a 10-seat dining table in the kitchen, along with bookshelves, lamps, and rugs. By 10:30, the house looked complete. I showered and dressed in a navy blazer, white shirt, and dark pants. Nothing flashy, but not casual either. It was the kind of outfit you wear when you want to be taken seriously, and nothing else. At 11 o'clock, I placed the 4 white envelopes on the dining table, one at each place setting. They looked incredibly stark against the dark wood. Then, I set the folder with Tyler's forearm prints right next to my seat. I walked over to the entryway. The marriage certificate hung in the morning light coming from the floor-to-ceiling window, the courthouse seal catching the sun. Just then, Ethan came downstairs in jeans and a button-down. He looked at the dining table and then looked at me. He looked at me. "Do you want me to stay down here?" I told him to stay upstairs, promising to call if I needed him. He kissed my forehead and went back up, and I heard his office door close. The house was ready. The envelopes were ready. The evidence was ready. Somewhere on the highway, my family was driving toward a version of me they had never met, the one who was completely done being flexible. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the head of the table, and waited. The doorbell finally rang at 1:07 p.m., 7 minutes late. Classic Overton timing. I walked over and opened the door. My mother stood in front, wearing a floral blouse she reserved for occasions she wanted to control. Behind her was Megan in a fitted dress, Tyler in a wrinkled polo, and my father. There he was, standing on my porch for the first time in 4 years, hands in his pockets, looking like a man dragged to a meeting he did not request. They stepped inside, and I watched their faces as they crossed the threshold. Mom saw the entryway first, the vaulted ceiling and natural stone floor. Then the living room opened to the left, and the kitchen to the right, with the island, the 10-seat table, and the floor-to-ceiling windows. She stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth opening and closing. My mother stammered, "Bianca, when did you—" But she could not finish. Megan said nothing, her jaw set as her eyes moved across every surface like she was appraising a piece of real estate. She scrutinized the kitchen fixtures, the countertops, and the view. Tyler scanned the room the way a hungry person scans a menu, looking for what he could take. My father just stood near the door, unable to make it past the entryway. I watched him look at the wall, staring directly at our marriage certificate, the courthouse seal, and that date, March 15th. He stared at it for 3 long seconds, then looked away, saying absolutely nothing. My mother opened her mouth, starting to go on about how beautiful the house looked, how proud she supposedly was of me. But I didn't want to hear it. I cut her off immediately. I told them to sit down so we could talk about the real reason they were here. I offered them water, just plain tap water, because I didn't owe them a tour of my life or my home. They sat. I took my place at the head of the table, looking at the white envelopes sitting there. My mother had walked into a $3.8 million house and immediately saw our marriage certificate from the courthouse, the ceremony she skipped, hanging in the entryway. She glanced at it, looked away, and sat down to ask me for money. Seriously, what would you even say to someone who treated the biggest day of your life like it was completely worthless? My mother cleared her throat, and I could tell she had rehearsed every single syllable of this speech. Family helps family. That is the golden rule we have always supposedly believed in. She folded her hands on the table, looking like she was chairing a corporate board meeting. Her voice was steady, practiced, and warm in that precise way warmth is used as a weapon. She told me my brother Tyler had been going through a difficult season, citing some financial decisions that simply did not pan out. She claimed it happens to many young men. Financial decisions. She spoke as if he had made a poor investment in the stock market, not bet $18,000 on a single basketball game. She told me they had all pitched in, mentioning the $45,000 she took from her retirement, the $20,000 from my sister Megan, and even $15,000 from our grandmother's savings. She stopped and stared, waiting for the math to sink in. She said the total shortfall was $180,000 and suggested that since Ethan and I were doing so well, we could close the gap. She asked me for nearly $200,000 at a dining table I had owned for exactly 3 hours. I grabbed my legal pad and wrote down 45, 20, 15. I drew a thick line beneath those figures and wrote out 180,000. I asked her what exactly this money would be used for. She claimed it was to get Tyler back on his feet, to clear his obligations and give him a fresh start. But when I asked who these obligations were to, the room fell dead silent. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Various creditors," my mother finally mumbled. I set my pen down and refused to write that down, because I knew it was a complete lie. Then Megan leaned forward, ready for her turn. She called me B, saying she knew they had not been great to me, but insisted Tyler was in serious trouble and they just needed a way out. I stared at my sister. B. It had been years since she last used that childhood nickname. I kept my voice flat, telling her I heard her, and she took that quiet response as an invitation to push further. She gestured around at our brand new kitchen, the massive windows, and the sheer scale of the house. She said $180,000 was a fortune to them, but for me, it was not exactly a big deal. When I asked her to clarify, she shrugged and said I had married well, and that some of them were not quite as lucky. The room went absolutely silent. Even Tyler looked up from his hands, and my father just kept staring blankly at the wood of the table. She said it so casually, as if my career, my hard-earned degree, my grueling 14-hour workdays, and my 4 years of clawing my way from a junior developer to a senior engineer were just some minor footnote. She acted like this house, the equity, and our financial stability were things that just landed in my lap by marriage, rather than the result of a decade of relentless work. And that word, lucky. As if luck had anything to do with eating cheap breakfast tacos in a cold courthouse parking lot on the exact morning my entire family decided a child's birthday party was more important than my wedding. I laid my pen flat on the pad, looked Megan dead in the eyes, and told her, I worked 2 jobs to graduate college entirely debt-free. I reminded her that I was employee number 7 at Ethan's tech startup. I was the one who wrote the actual code for the core product that eventually went public. Lucky was absolutely not the word I would use to describe my success. Megan blinked, completely speechless, because she had not rehearsed a response for that. Good. I opened the thick folder in front of me, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. My mother's eyes locked onto the documents. Tyler sat up straight, and Megan pressed her hands flat on the table. Before we go any further, I told them, I want to read something Tyler posted online exactly 3 weeks ago. Tyler's head snapped up in sheer panic. I pointed to the paper. The post was dated March 15th, the exact day of my wedding. I read his words aloud to the table. My sister just married some tech guy. Once the money hits, I am golden. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Tyler's face went completely pale. He was not embarrassed. He was terrified because he had been caught. He asked me where I got it, his voice cracking on the last word. I told him it did not matter where I found it. What mattered was that while I was getting married in a courthouse with only one friend as a witness, he was online calculating my net worth. My mother reached for the printout, read it, and claimed it was taken out of context. I told her the real context is that Tyler owes $180,000 in gambling debts. These were not bad investments or financial decisions that did not pan out. It was gambling, online poker, sports betting, and a private loan from a dangerous lender he refers to as D. And he has been counting on my husband's money since before our public offering paperwork was even filed. Tyler stood halfway up, whining that I did not understand the pressure he was under. I snapped at him to sit down, and he obeyed. I told him I understood perfectly, listing off the $45,000 he took from Mom's retirement, the $20,000 from Megan, and the $15,000 from Grandma. I knew the full number, and I knew the whole sordid story. I had seen everything in our family group chat, the very same chat where they never once mentioned my wedding. I had read every single message, choosing to never reply. My father spoke up for the first time then, calling me Bianca, and pleading for everyone to calm down because we are family and should not say things we cannot take back. I turned to look at him. He sat at the far end of the table with his arms crossed, wearing that same uncomfortable expression he had worn throughout my childhood. It was the face of a man who wanted to be anywhere else. I reminded him that he abandoned us when I was 11, skipping my high school graduation. I told him he did not show up for my college graduation either, and he certainly did not come to my wedding. Yet here he was, sitting at my custom dining table, simply because Tyler needed cash and someone thought his presence would add extra weight to the demand. He flinched and looked down, muttering that he knew he had not been around but was trying now. I told him I was not blaming him, just stating facts. The room was dead silent. My father had absolutely no leverage, and he knew it. You cannot suddenly mediate a family conflict when you have been absent for 2 decades. You cannot ask for calm when you were never there for the storms. But my mother jumped right back in. My mother snapped that this was not about the past, but about the present moment, claiming Tyler could lose absolutely everything. When I questioned what he would lose, she lowered her voice, warning me that there are people out there who are not patient. She told me this was no longer about money, but about basic safety. I heard the clear threat of debt collectors, or perhaps something even worse. She was escalating the stakes, hoping that fear would work where guilt had failed. I picked up my pen, wrote the word safety on my legal pad with a massive question mark, and told her that if his safety was truly at risk, he needed professional help, like a counselor or a rehab program, not a check from his sister. That was definitely not the answer she had come here to get. And then, right on cue, the tears started flowing. My mother folded forward in her chair, buried her face in her hands, and began to sob. These were not the fake, performative tears I had seen her cry at holidays when she wanted someone to agree with her. This was different, jagged, low, and genuinely ugly. She wept through her hands, admitting she was not perfect, that she had leaned on Megan too much, and that she should have been there at the courthouse. For a brief second, I did not see the master manipulator anymore. I just saw a 58-year-old woman in my dining room, realizing the math of her life was not adding up. She choked out that Tyler was her son, that he was sick, and that gambling was a real illness. She pleaded that he needed treatment and his family could not give up on him. In that moment, I actually believed her tears. I believed she was terrified, exhausted, and that she had spent the last year watching her entire life savings dissolve into my brother's addiction. But then she looked up, wiped her wet eyes, and shifted. She told me that if I could not do this for Tyler, I had to do it for her. She claimed she could not sleep, her retirement was completely gone, and if I did not help them, she would be forced to sell her home. And there it was, the pivot from genuine pain to leveraged guilt. Classic Diane. Her tears were real, I believed that, but real tears and honest intentions are completely different things. She was not asking me to save Tyler. She was asking me to absorb the consequences of a disaster she had enabled for years. If you have ever dealt with a master manipulator, you know exactly how this feels. I had seen this script before, the crying, the guilt, the escalation. It was the exact playbook she used when I was 12 and forced to skip my own school play to babysit Tyler. I was done running that play. I stood up, my chair legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Every single eye in the room locked onto me. I walked slowly over to the kitchen island where the 4 white envelopes were lined up in a neat row. I picked them up, brought them back to the dining table, and dropped one in front of each of them. Diane, Megan, Tyler, and my father. I commanded them to open them. Tyler poked at his envelope cautiously, as if it might burn him, and asked me what it was. I told him simply that it was my final answer. My mother reached for her envelope first, her fingers still trembling from her tears. She tore open the paper flap and pulled out the single, crisp sheet of paper waiting inside. I let a heavy silence hang over the room as they began to read. Before they got too far, I spoke up, capturing their attention. I told them I wanted to say one crucial thing. They all looked up at me. I reminded them that I had sent out 42 save-the-date cards for my wedding, and every single one of them was returned declined. It was not because people were busy or had scheduling conflicts. It was because my mother personally called every aunt, uncle, and cousin to tell them the wedding was postponed. Diane's face drained of color. She stammered a denial, but I cut her off. Aunt Linda told me 3 weeks after the wedding that she called her directly. 2 other relatives confirmed it. My own mother called 40 guests to cancel my wedding, clearing my day so Megan's birthday party could have a full house. Nobody spoke up for me then. So when you sit at my table today and ask me for $180,000 because family helps family, you need to understand something. I do not have the version of family you are describing. That family does not exist. It never did. I sat back down, cold and resolute. Now, read the letter, I said. They did. I watched their faces as the reality of my words landed. Mom's eyes moved slowly, line by line. Tyler skimmed, then went back to reread the first paragraph in disbelief. Megan held the legal paper in her hands like it was a terrifying medical diagnosis. The letter was clean, sharp, and entirely direct. My attorney, David Flores, had done incredible work putting my boundaries into cold, binding words. Declaration of Financial Independence? I read it aloud for the room. I, Bianca Overton, hereby declare the following. I will not co-sign any loan, mortgage, or financial obligation for any member of the Overton family. I will not provide monetary gifts exceeding $100 per calendar year. I will not bail out, absorb, or refinance any debt, whether consumer, gambling, or otherwise. I will not serve as a financial guarantor, reference, or collateral contact. The official notary seal sat in the bottom right corner, right below the lawyer's letterhead. My signature was signed in permanent black ink. Tyler threw his copy onto the wooden table with a loud smack. "You can't be serious," he spat. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I have never been more serious in my life." Mom just stared at the page, her tears finally drying up. What replaced them was something much harder, a cold anger. "This is a legal document?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Against your own family?" I held her gaze, refusing to look away. "This is a boundary, Mom," I told her. "Something you never bothered to teach me, so I had to teach myself." She set the paper down slowly, precisely, as if she were carefully planning her next move. Meanwhile, Megan was still reading, her lips moving silently as she processed the text. When she finished, she folded it up and set it down. Nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity. The only sound in my house was the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of a lawnmower down the street. A boundary in writing, signed and notarized. It was the first real boundary I had ever set with my family, and this time, it was not going to be flexible. Tyler was the first to react. He stood up so fast and hard that his heavy chair tipped backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor with a loud crack that echoed through the kitchen. Megan flinched at the noise, and Dad shrank back into his seat, looking exhausted. Tyler glared at me, his eyes wild with anger as he growled out those predictable words. "You owe us," he said. Tyler's voice was loud and ragged as he kept yelling. "You owe us. You lived in that house rent-free until you were 18. Mom fed you, clothed you, and kept a roof over your head. And now you sit in your modern mansion with your tech bro husband thinking you are better than everyone else?" I did not stand up, and I did not raise my voice. I remained calm as I replied. I lived in a damp room above the garage, and I paid the utilities myself, starting from age 15. I still have the receipts. Tyler sneered, shaking his head. "Oh, the receipts! Of course you have the receipts. Perfect Bianca with her files, her lawyer, and her little declaration. "You're cold," he hissed. "Ice cold." I looked back at him. "I am not cold," I said. "I am clear." "You are a sellout," Tyler sneered, pointing a finger. "You got rich and forgot where you came from." I met his angry eyes and said, "I remember exactly where I came from, Tyler. In fact, that is the exact reason I wrote this letter." He took a threatening step toward me, then another, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. But then we heard a sound from upstairs, soft footsteps on the hardwood. My husband Ethan appeared at the top of the staircase. He did not come down, and he did not say a word. He simply stood by the railing, his arms relaxed, staring down at my brother. Tyler stopped in his tracks. He looked up at Ethan, then back at me, realizing the math was very simple. Tyler knew he was in someone else's home, demanding an astronomical sum of money from a sister he had never supported, all while her husband watched his every move from the stairs. The reality sank in, and he backed down. He picked up his fallen chair, set it upright, and sat back down in silence. Megan had been watching the entire exchange with her arms crossed, her eyes calculating. When Tyler finally shut up, she eagerly filled the void. "You know what, Bianca? You always acted like you were above us, like you were too good for this family, like being quiet and competent made you better than everyone else." I looked at her, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. I moved out at 18, worked 2 jobs, and paid my own way through college. "That is not being above everyone, Megan," I said softly. "That is just being completely alone." She scoffed. "And now you have this beautiful house, this husband, and you can't even—" She cut herself off. "Go ahead and finish that sentence," I challenged. She looked down at the table, refusing to meet my eyes, staring at the letter and the printed forum posts. "Help your own brother," she mumbled. I leaned in. "I tried to invite my own family to my wedding, Megan. But you moved your birthday party to my wedding day. You claimed the venue could only do that specific date, but you booked it 2 weeks after I sent out my save the dates. I checked with them, Megan. They were open the entire month." Her face paled. It was clear she never expected me to check. I continued, my voice steady. "And Mom helped you fill that party by telling everyone my wedding was postponed." Nobody dared to contradict me. The facts were laid bare on the table. The forum posts, the RSVPs, Aunt Linda's confirmation, and the venue's official records. There was nothing left to deny. Megan sat back, speechless for the first time since walking in. The golden child had finally run out of excuses. I didn't push or gloat. I let the silence do its work on people who had been caught. Mom was the last one standing, composing herself as the tears dried. Her posture straightened and her voice became steady. This was the Diane who had managed a household of 4 on a single income. She was the Diane who had kept every single plate spinning for 30 years. But today, every last plate was shattered on the floor. "When you were little," she said, her voice sharp, "I worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head. I did not sleep for years, Bianca. I made sacrifices that you cannot even begin to imagine. And this notarized piece of paper is how you repay me?" I looked at her calmly. "You did work 3 jobs, Mom. That is true, and I am genuinely grateful for it. But my gratitude is not a blank check. I gave absolutely everything I had to this family growing up, while you gave everything to Megan and Tyler. All you ever gave me was the expectation that I would just figure it out on my own. And you know what? I did figure it out. That is not a complaint. It is just the cold, hard truth of what happened. Mom leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. If you send us away with absolutely nothing today, if this legal document is your final answer, then I will never speak to you again. There it was, the ultimate weapon. The nuclear option she had held over everyone in her life for decades. The absolute threat of her silence and absence. I looked at her, really looked at the woman who raised me. You did not speak to me on my wedding day, Mom, I said. You did not speak to me for 3 weeks after that either. The only reason you are speaking to me now is because you need money. So, with all due respect, Mom, that silent threat of yours does not carry the weight you think it does anymore. At that, her face completely crumbled. It was not the theatrical, performative breakdown she had tried earlier. This was something smaller, quieter. It was a fleeting flash of real, raw recognition in her eyes, right before she forced it down and pushed it away. You will regret this, she whispered coldly. I shrugged. Maybe, I replied. But if I do, I will regret it on my own terms. Tyler was the first to leave. He snatched his copy of the letter off the table, stuffed it into his jacket pocket, and walked out without looking back. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the window. Megan stood up next, pulling her designer purse onto her shoulder as she walked toward the door. But she paused in the entryway, her eyes locking onto the framed marriage certificate hanging on the wall. You know, she said quietly, without even turning around to face me, that dress you wore at the courthouse? I saw the photo Rachel posted online. $89. She paused, the silence stretching between us. It actually looked beautiful. It was easily the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me in her entire life. No angle, no performative drama, just a sister stating a simple truth. But it came far too late. She walked out without waiting for me to respond. Dad stood up slowly. Dad buttoned his jacket, a lingering habit from the years when he wore business suits to work, back before the divorce, before his move to Oregon, and before Pam. He walked over to where I was sitting. I am so sorry, Bianca, he murmured, for all of it. He did not bother to specify what all of it actually meant, and honestly, he probably did not even know himself. Then, he left. Mom was the last one remaining. She stood by the table for what felt like minutes, her hand resting on the back of the empty chair. She finally walked to the front door, stopping right in front of our marriage certificate. She reached out and touched the gold frame, staring at our names and the date, March 15th. Then, she walked out. The front door clicked shut, and an overwhelming silence settled over the house. Bright sunlight was still pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and even the distant lawnmower had finally gone quiet. I stood in the hallway, simply listening to the stillness. On the dining table, 4 chairs were pushed back at messy angles, and 4 opened envelopes lay scattered across the wood. The folder with Tyler's printed forum posts was still open to the exact page I had read aloud. I sat back down at the head of the table. The glass of water I had poured before they arrived was still full, so I slowly drank it. Ethan came downstairs and quietly sat in the chair next to mine, the one nobody had used. My husband did not ask what had happened. He could easily read the entire story written in the quiet geometry of the room. It is finally done, I whispered to him. He didn't speak, just reached over and took my hand in his. We sat like that for a long time, holding on to each other. Eventually, I reached into my wallet and pulled out my very last save-the-date card, number 42. I had carried it with me since March. The cream-colored cardstock was slightly bent at the corners, my handwriting fading where it had rubbed against my driver's license. I stared at the address, the date, and the small heart I had drawn next to our names back when I thought that was just what you did when you were happy. I slowly folded the paper, listening to the sharp crease. I slid open the white envelope containing my copy of the declaration, the fifth one, the one I had kept for myself. Slipping Megan's save-the-date card inside felt like forcing an old wound to meet a brand-new boundary. After sealing it, I wrote my own name on the front and placed it on the table. Ethan looked at me, his eyes soft with concern, and asked if I was okay. "I will be," I told him. He just nodded. He believed me because I had never lied to him. Sure, the 4 dining chairs still needed to be pushed in, the table had to be wiped down, and those pages of Tyler's sworn confessions were waiting for the shredder. But all of that could wait. For now, I sat in my house with my husband, enjoying the quiet I had earned. 6 months later, in August, Tyler entered a state-funded rehab program. It was not because of our family meeting, but because a court ordered it after he defaulted on a personal loan and the lender took legal action. The program was free, so my money was never involved. He was 4 months in when I last checked, which I rarely did. Mom sold the house in September, downsizing to a 1-bedroom condo 40 minutes from where we grew up. She told the extended family that I had turned my back on them during our hardest time. Some of them believed her, but some of them did not. 3 of my cousins reached out privately, sending separate messages weeks apart, all saying variations of the same thing. They would have come to the courthouse if they had known it wasn't postponed. I thanked them, but didn't say more. You and I both know how empty those apologies can feel after the damage is done. In October, Megan texted me just 6 words. "I shouldn't have moved the party." I read it, but I didn't respond. Maybe I never will. When my birthday came in November, Dad sent a card. No cash, no long letter, just, "Happy birthday, Bianca. I hope you're well, Dad." It was the first card from him in 20 years, so I kept it while Ethan and I settled into our home. We hosted Rachel for dinner every Friday, turning it into a weekly tradition. We also adopted a dog, a terrier mix named Biscuit, who chewed through 2 couch cushions in his first week. My financial lockup period ended in October, and I diversified my portfolio with a professional advisor who was not a family member. The family group chat still sat on my phone. I never unmuted it or deleted it. I just stopped opening it. Our marriage certificate still hung in the entryway. Every morning, I walked past it on my way to the kitchen, and most days, I didn't even notice it was there anymore. That felt peaceful. It felt right. Still, people occasionally ask me if I regret the choices I made. They ask about the courthouse, the letter, and my refusal to bail Tyler out. But I do not regret any of it. Ironically, my mother taught me one true thing, even if she never intended to. She said it over the phone the day I told her Megan had stolen my wedding date. She stated it like an absolute fact, as if it defined who I was and always would be. "You are flexible, Bianca. You always have been." She was right. I was flexible enough to pack my bags at 18 and build a successful life from absolutely nothing. I was flexible enough to marry the man I loved in a quiet courthouse with just one friend, no flowers, and feel 0 shame. And I was flexible enough to sit across from 4 people who had erased my wedding and hand them a legal document showing I was done. I was also flexible enough to know that walking away from them was not an act of cruelty. It was not revenge, and it certainly was not bitterness. It was simply the first truly honest thing I had ever done for myself. 42 cards, 1 courthouse, 4 envelopes, and a marriage certificate that cost exactly $27, now hanging in the entryway of a beautiful house I built with my own 2 hands. That is not a sad story. That is a clear, unshakable boundary, and it is my story. It took 42 cards, 1 quiet courthouse, and 4 envelopes to change everything. If my story has resonated with you today, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.